So let's go back and pick apart downward dog a little bit more, because there's a lot we can do there and we spend a lot of time there, right? So go ahead and come to downward dog for me, please. Hands on the mat, feet about body length back. Beautiful. Okay, so let's start from the ground up and think about all the things we want to feel in downward dog. One of the things is hands. We end up with students who often will sink into the outer edges of their hands. Yeah, and this part is going to kind of pop up. Even when their fingers are down, we get a lot of this. So reminding students to push the big finger mound, index finger mound, into the mat is really good. I can do that with my hands, kind of like I did with the feet, or I can put my fingers there and encourage him to press down into my fingers. Moving to the feet, one of the things we want to try to do is sink the heels down toward the mat. So just placing my hands here, adding the verbal cue, and encouraging him to relax. They may or may not touch. That has everything to do with how much you've stretched your calf and Achilles tendon, but also how much pressure you have in the bones of your ankle. Not everybody's ankle bones are shaped the same way, okay? So now that I've grounded through the hands and feet, you cool to stay there a little longer? Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to think about that rotation of the thighs, right? So we can do the same cue we did standing. I cross my wrists, I go right at the knee, just above, and then say rotate internally, and then sink the heels down, right? Just a little reminder there. I'm not going to walk up in a class and just randomly stand with my pelvis behind somebody like this. So one of my favorite things to do is to push from the front. Come on down and rest for a second. If Jaman were a marathon runner who never did yoga and couldn't touch his toes and couldn't straighten his legs and was really uncomfortable sitting on the floor, I would not do this adjustment, because when I do this adjustment, anytime I'm pushing the hips or pulling the hips that way, I'm sinking a lot more weight into the heels, which is going to put more strain on the hamstrings, take him deeper into the legs. I know it feels really good to him because he's a dancer. And so a hamstring stretch feels like something you have to do every day because it's just part of life, right? So facing my work, when you're ready, I'll have you come back up, is really important. I don't want to stand over here pushing, pulling, twisting, because it's going to hurt me over time. And my body weight is part of what makes this such a successful adjustment. I'm going to stand square with the student, and I'm going to put my pushing leg, my strong leg, right in the center in line with his head, almost between his hands. My opposite leg comes up beside him nice and close. So I'm in this strong lunge. My back is straight. I don't want to be way out here rounding my back. I want to be nice and tall, watch my own body mechanics. The heels and palms of my hands are going to go right under the iliac crest, and I like to turn my fingers out to make sure they're not anywhere they shouldn't be. And then as I lean in, I'm going to straighten my arms, use this back leg to push his hips up and out that way toward the wall I'm looking at. It should be very easy for you as the teacher to do this adjustment. If it feels like you're working really hard, something's not right, right? How's that feel? You can tell me, if you want more or less. There's a lot of more weight in the heels, but what I like about it is there's a lot less weight in the shoulders and in the wrists. Yeah, come on down and rest. So I can push from the front, I can pull from the back. I will only usually do that one in the context of a sun salutation, because I don't think it's necessary to put myself behind a student in that vulnerable position if I don't need to, okay? Some other things that come up for teachers here are the rotation of the arms. You've probably heard a teacher say, squeeze your shoulders in or wing your shoulders out. There needs to be a reason why. Both are valid depending on the intention. So the real thing to consider is, if I'm going to give that cue, why am I doing it? What's the purpose? So if you'd come up one more time for me. If you wing your arms out and turn your elbows to the outside walls, and yeah, you don't turn your wrists though, and let your shoulders kind of open onto your back, what you end up with is the ability to push your chest really far through your legs. See that? That's not necessarily a bad or good thing. It might feel good to the student. If you rotate your shoulders in the opposite, see that change? It creates more flatness here, less of that retraction of the scapula. If you're dealing with shoulder instability, pain or injury in the shoulder, this is probably a better way to go, because you can see how strong this is when the scapula is wrapped in this direction. If you go the opposite again and turn out, there's going to be some instability here. Instability is not a bad thing if you want a big stretch, But if it hurts or you've been injured previously, it could be problematic. So if I see something like that, it's kind of hard to explain to students how to rotate their arms because they're upside down and they don't really know what in or out is. But I can put my hand here and say, just like I did in plank, right? Push into my hand, and there we go. And tuck your shoulders in, or bring your armpits towards your face, or however you want to say it, right? Different cues are going to get different things out of the student. Come down and rest. It's a really good example of how the same adjustment I did somewhere else in the practice in plank can apply in this pose as well. A lot of these adjustments are applicable in many different areas. And you're going to start to be comfortable with, when I do this, I always get a really good response from my students. So that's kind of my go-to cue. When I do this one or say this thing, it works for me and my students. That's not a one-size-fits-all solution. So play, get somebody who's willing to give you honest feedback. This feels really good, or this feels uncomfortable, that's too much, you're not giving me enough pressure here, you feel kind of creepy, your hand's in an appropriate place, right? Get somebody who will be real with you and really talk back to you and help you refine your skills. And then you're going to start to notice in some of these postures, there are certain body types that are easier for me to adjust. My height comes into factor there. If I have a really long student, some of the adjustments I do, I can't do on them because I can't reach. If I have a really tiny student, because I'm taller and larger bodied, that might be a little difficult for me to get in there and adjust them. If I have a really large student, some teachers aren't going to feel comfortable adjusting a student who's very tall or very heavy because of the amount of weight it takes to push into them, or the amount of weight the student's putting on you. So you really have to do trial and error. It's okay to have moments where you go to do an adjustment and you're not getting the thing you want, the result you want. Just move on, go do something else. Don't harp on it, don't get too caught up on it. All right? Okay, we're gonna do some standing poses next.